Welcome to the Tech Transform podcast by Oliver White Asia Pacific. I'm your host, Rod Hozack, and for the first time since Oliver White, the man, started the business more than 50 years ago, we've gone back to the future to explore how technology and business processes must work together to drive real transformation. Today marks a milestone, episode 11, our final episode in this foundational series. Over the past 10 episodes, we've covered a huge range of ground, from data governance to agile thinking, finance, forecasting, AI, and the practical reality of getting technology to deliver on its promise. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm grateful to all the experts who've generously shared their time and their insights along the way. This, however, is not goodbye. As new trends and challenges emerge, we plan to return from time to time with special one-off episodes to keep the conversation alive, because if we've learned anything, it's that tech transformation never really stops. For this final episode in the series, we're going out on a high note with a topic close to my heart: culture, collaboration, and ethics in tech. Because at the end of the day, business transformation isn't just technical, it's human. Before we dive into this conversation with Stephen Hanman, let's first check in with Olga Papageorgiou for the latest in data management and AI. Hello, Olga.
Hi, Rod. It's great to be back. Today, I'm going to discuss a recent publication from MIT that has caused quite the stir. The report explores the state of Gen AI in business by analyzing over 300 generative AI deployments and received responses from over 150 executives. So what's its key message? Gen AI has been extremely useful for personal productivity, but this isn't translating into enterprise benefits, with 95% of enterprise Gen AI pilots failing to deliver ROI. With an estimated 30 to 40 billion spent by enterprises in this space, that's a large amount of sunk cost across industry with very little return. The top 5 barriers for AI pilot stalling were identified as an unwillingness to adopt new tools, model output quality concerns, poor user experience, lack of executive ownership, and challenging change management. The results point to the biggest barrier of AI adoption having more to do with how organizations help their already busy teams visualize a future where they can use enterprise AI offerings as part of their core ways of working, and trust that it has been trained in the context of the organization's process and governance frameworks. The report also questioned if large language models, or LLMs, are the right fit for enterprise use cases, with top barriers to adoption for mission-critical work reported as breaking in edge cases and unable to adapt, can't customize to specific workflows, too much manual context required every time, and it doesn't learn from the user's feedback. Which begs the question, what characteristics the rare success stories have? The report concluded that successful enterprise builders create adaptive, embedded systems that learn from feedback and focus on narrow but high-value use cases and integrate them deeply into workflows, and can scale through continuous learning rather than broad feature sets. So what does this mean for business? As we've uncovered through the Tech Transform podcast, to truly transform business, we must first focus on people and their behaviors and ensure organizational processes to drive success are understood across the enterprise. This creates an environment where the benefits of AI technologies can be effectively leveraged. Taking the reverse approach in your organization, AI will quickly amplify any dysfunction that is present. If you'd like to read the full report, you can search MIT State of AI in Business 2025 for a downloadable PDF copy. As always, I'd love to hear our listeners' thoughts. Do you resonate with these findings, and will they change your approach to AI deployment? Let us know in the comments, and look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thank you, Olga. Stephen is the chair of the Dyson Group, co-founder, Safe Care Culture, director, Harvard Stack Australia, and where I first met his work was founder and principal at Benchmarking Success, which we at Oliver White use to set the foundations for improvement for companies over many years. This means Stephen is no stranger to data and creating meaningful insights from that data, from pioneering self-care culture at Dulux Group to leading the charge at Harvest Stack Australia, a blockchain-enabled marketplace reinventing food supply chain. Stephen brings not only decades of experience, but a philosophy that challenges to move from power over people to power with people. In this episode, we'll explore the human side of technology because, let's face it, AI and data tools can do amazing things, but without trust, transparency, and cultural alignment, they can just as easily lead us astray. Our theme today is how collaborative cultures and ethical operating systems are essential for sustainable tech transformation and how business can prepare their people, not just prepare their data. Good morning, Stephen. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Rod. Very well.
Good news. Are you ready for the questions?
Yes, he's
Good on you. The first one is, your work focuses heavily on moving from domination-based leadership models to interdependent, collaborative ones. How important is this mindset shift as businesses move into adoption of new technologies and data availability?
So, rather large question to start with. I come from a corporate background where we met in terms of what was benchmarking success. So, looking at what world's best or best-in-class supply chains were doing, which incorporated obviously the customer order fulfillment and sales and operations planning as we knew it back then. I've sort of always had this collaborative gene inside me. And when I moved out of that benchmarking success world, I went into more a development-based environment where I was doing the change. So, that domination-based leadership model is, let me just try and describe it simply. Industrial Revolution, they were predominantly command and control hierarchical systems. And my job as the leader was to impose my will on the people. And that sort of created a system and a model of management that we're not educating like that anymore, but that's still at the heart of the domination model. So we're trying to find new ways of doing things, and that change has been going on for probably 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 years. There's now an idea that really the challenge is for leaders to actually manage in the chaos. So therefore we need a new style of leadership. And that's where I would say a collaborative leadership model, in contrast to a domination model, is one where, I've got a mindset, now I don't know whether, you've ever experienced the concept of the prisoner's dilemma, which is the red-blue simulation. So I think that's at the core of this transition from dominator to collaborative, because ultimately we're all educated and we've all been brought up to be competitive. So I've had to learn when to compete and when to collaborate, and talking to people about in terms of, does it make any sense to compete in a sales and operations planning or an integrated business planning process when we all work in the same company and we all want the same goal that the CEO or the board have articulated? And to me, competition in that model doesn't make sense. So being able to switch on and off that collaborative versus competitive trust, desire system is the challenge. So therefore, when I make a promise at a meeting about a forecast or a demand or something that's going to happen, you should be able to take my promise as real, because we're in relationship with each other and promises matter. To me, supply chains are about, do people keep their promises? If we trust each other, we don't need to dominate each other. The research says we're less emotionally intelligent today than we were 20 years ago, which I find like a bizarre idea, but I can understand it. I don't think human beings are any different than what they used to be. It's just that life has changed, and how do we lead in this new environment where, the younger generations have very different drivers and motivations? That's where the collaborative system starts to play and becomes powerful organisations. And I use the idea of a machine, which is the old metaphor for organisations, which is a closed system, and my job was to actually control everything.
Yeah.
In contrast to that, another metaphor might be the concept of a living system, and that living system needs the right amount of relationship warmth. So that's the fire element, the right amount of information exchange. The water element is the right people get the right information at the right time. And then if we move down into the earth element, that's about resources and structures. Rather than it being a fixed thing, Rod, this is a dynamic process that's able to take into account the complexity of life that we're living in today.
One supplementary question is, what is the feedback or reaction you're getting by lead team members to this change in mindset and way of working?
It is still patchy. Here's an example. So Me, We is a book that I published now 10 years ago. The year that was published, which is 2014, there was also a book published called Reinventing Organisations by a fellow called Frederick Laloux. His book has been a game changer in this concept of living systems. It's now been translated into 25 languages. He's sold over 1 million copies. That book has led to a zeitgeist in change in how organisations work. And there's now thousands of organisations who are working with this concept of living system. They've listed 5 organisations here: Hire, which is the Chinese manufacturer of white goods, Bertsorg, and Beta. And Bertsorg is one of the organisations in Reinventing Organisations. It's a book about 12 case studies. Bertsorg is about 8,000 people. It has about 650 teams. It's a neighbourhood nursing model. It saved billions of dollars in healthcare in the Netherlands. There's less than 100 people in head office, and 40 of those people are coaches. And those coaches only get work when the self-organising autonomous teams of 12 all over the country ask for help in the area of marketing or finance, and they run totally independent of anybody else. So they're like little micro units of a business. Now, that doesn't mean, Rod, that everyone gets it. So we're in this sort of moment of reckoning, and it's a radically different picture than the one that, you and I have grown up with. I suppose part of my work is making that story more open and available to people.
It reminds me of a saying that it's important to understand the difference between what is and what should be, because that gives you the gap. Let me summarize now, because I've picked up actually quite a lot of points out of that one. The first one is that dealing with the chaos, to me, is about dealing with uncertainty and having the mechanisms in place to rock and roll with it without being reactive. The second point I heard was learning to compete and learning when to collaborate. The other point that came up, which is brilliant, if we trust each other, there's no need to dominate. The next one is we're less EQ than we were years ago. That's a revelation. And the younger generation have different drivers. However, we're all still people. So then moving on to the next question, Harvest Stack sounds like it was a fascinating case study of digital disruption with ethical intent, blockchain transparency, traceability. What were some of the cultural and technological challenges you had to overcome to bring this idea to life?
I first started with Harvest Stack. I learned that somebody was trying to create a global end-to-end supply chain that would remove the black box supply chain and would make everything transparent through a monetized blockchain. So that was back in 2019. My co-author of Me to We, Ian George, ran a construction company. I asked Ian to present to 40 people who were a mix of contractors who were all asked to play in the construction game with him without tendering for their work. That was quite a radical concept 15 years ago, and it still is today. He bought a bag of fruit with him, and he built a red apple hierarchy, and he's described the red apple hierarchy as the dominator model, and that was that everybody is seen to be the same, but he happens to be the red apple on the top of the hierarchy, so he's the smartest person in the room, and the people at the bottom of the hierarchy are deemed to be the least smart people in the room. And so he said that's the way the world works today. And then he then dipped into his bag of fruit and he put a piece of fruit on a table that was flat without a hierarchy, and he had 10 different pieces of fruit, including a tomato and a lemon and a pineapple. He described that what we're going to do is move away from the red apple hierarchy where we tell you what to do as the builder into a model where we're going to give you the work. Remember, he knows all these people. He's worked with them. He's been collaborating. It's not a radical idea not to tender. Even though if you tell anyone, they go, that's radical. There was a very detailed budgeting process. The builder knew exactly what it should cost, and they negotiated with those contractors, the 7 of them. And then the contractors joined the design phase of the building, which never happens. So all the contractors became part of the design process through what we called interface conversations, in that an interface is between 2 departments, 2 people. It's like demand and supply. They should be both interested in each other. They should both be interested in what they do that hurts the other one, and they need to be in relationship with each other. I ran a project with Shell, and it's worthwhile probably just mentioning a quote. The project manager said, "It is like we now have the right relationship with the others. We decided together what information we needed to share and who should share it, and we identified who should communicate with who." Right? That's an example of a living system, which I was amazed that once leadership allowed the people on the floor to run the process and gave them authority to make those decisions, it delivered this incredible outcome. That was the sort of dynamic at Harvestack, that we were all a diverse circle of fruit. We were actually saying that the old system is broken. The food system is broken. The truth was that chefs were cooking food that they didn't know where it came from. So what we've done in Harvestack is we've created connections directly with, let's say, I don't know, the top 50 restaurants right now, with a group of 20 or 30 producers who are probably the most sustainable producers, fishers and farmers in the country. And they have a direct connection on our market platform. The commercials are already agreed. They've collaborated together to sort that. And we have facilitated the logistics process. Customers are now ordering directly from producers, and those restaurants have videos, QR codes about those fishers and farmers that a consumer like you and I could read about in terms of where someone's food comes from. We're just about to start to scale, Rod. They asked me to be a CEO, and I said, no, we're not going to have a CEO. We're not going to need managers, because we're all going to be responsible for what we're doing, and we're all in the circle together. So we build relationship to initiate the business. We try and maintain those relationships that are quite personal throughout the process, which then gives us some currency to resolve issues when we get them. Now the living system is starting to operate, and it invites people to be their best self in their organisations, which I think is critical, because we spend a lot of time at work.
To summarise that, to distill the bits out that I picked up, collaborating across the value chain to optimize it through collaboration and transparency and engagement in design, you end up at that living system with a group of people who trust each other. The second one is you still need a coordinator to get started, but then you invite in the experts to take a leadership role. The increased awareness and connection and overall engagement is the goal of this, which means that once you've designed that, you can move on to your technology integration, which was your customers are now ordering directly to the fishers and farmers. But at the end of it, you said you need to do this up front. So you've actually got to know what you want to do before you then ramp in a technology solution. It is a good segue into the next question, and you might have answered it, but many of our listeners are working with large, complex data systems and trying to prepare for AI, and they're large organizations. What's your advice for balancing tech adoption with human development?
Getting rid of the politics, Rod's a pretty massive thing. And I would say that politics is there because we're obsessed with power. This living system idea is changing the power dynamic from you having power over people to having power with people. And when we have power with people, we're not imposing our will on them, but we're inviting them as a free human being to take part in the change. You've got to get the mindset right in terms of understanding the mindset that we need to be successful for this transformation. And then we've got to get the relational aspects right. We've got to acknowledge that we don't have strong relationships. That's where this interface conversation comes in, where we need to resolve those conflicts, get back into relationship with each other, and realize that we can provide the answer. So taking time to make sure that we get the mindset common and clear based on the vision of why we're going to do something, align that vision with values and behaviours that support the pursuit of the vision, and then the what that we've identified to do, we pursue in the context of the vision and the values and behaviours. So when we think about AI and data mining, Harvestack is going to be a significant player in artificial intelligence. We're working with a sustainable fishery in Victoria, and we can see that an AI solution will tell us how much fish we can take out of that fishery and it to be sustainable. We also know, Rod, that with the market platform, we're going to have data about seafood that no one else in the country will have. You as a consumer can experience that traceability and provenance and the narrative of the good story, even though I'm a human-centric person and all my work is in that context. I know that Harvest Stack is a technology business. Harvest is what we do. The stack is the technology bit. So we're trying to get the human side and the technology side to be able to sing, but we know we've got to get the human and strategic side right first. So then we know what sort of technology we need to enable the intention.
What I heard there, getting rid of the politics, but the line is move away from power over people to power with people.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to make sure you get the mindset right, get the relationships right, in fact, even outside your organization as well as internally, and then pursue what we have to do via the vision and values, only if that gets in the way of where we want to go. The data then becomes your competitive advantage and sustainability of the environment you're working in. So that leads on to the next question. We surveyed our clients and came up with 100 odd questions. This one is, I'd like to explore how we get the team to understand the tools they use, including what the tools are capable of doing and what they can't do, and the risks of potentially unintended consequences.
I use a phrase called slowing down to speed up. So we've all got way too much to do, but we've got to recognise that the way we're doing it is not smart. So we've got to use technology to enable us, but we need to take time to work out what technology we need, and we need to be driven by the strategic aim of the organisation. I've always thought leadership is just setting the strategic priorities and then executing them with discipline. And that discipline means let's go back to the start and make sure that we're all on the same page. And let's stay in this room and design the objective so we're crystal clear. Because in that system, the world becomes easy and not stressful because I know I can trust you, Rod, to do what you promised. I then introduce the concept of best self. I think everyone wakes up in the morning and they want to be the best version of themselves for that day. Any organisation's designed for the best self. They're designed for the people who don't do the right thing. And we're very much compliance driven rather than driven by what the best people want. So I think that's another restructure of the living system is around what is it we want to do? What is it we want to create? What is it we're going to do? So that concept of best self, I support. I have this concept called above the line and below the line. And I ask people just to know where they are. I work in let's say a warehouse environment. I have a program called Safe Care Culture. And all I say is that I want you to intervene on the floor when you see something that's unsafe. People feel safe because everyone's got each other's back in this warehouse, and safety's been turned on its head because now safety is owned by the people on the floor. Leadership have created the structure, but now the people on the floor have got the values and behaviours to support the leadership system to enable incredible numbers. We've got warehouses that haven't had an incident for 2,000 or 3,000 days. So they're ultra safe. So that's the work I do up front with people to get the mindset right, to enable us to be in relationship, to then create the structures that we need, Rod. So I always go backwards because if I'm thrust into the structure and the mindset's not right and the relationship's not right, I know it's going to fail.
To summarize, though, because there were some gems, even though we might have answered those, there were some gems in that one. Slow down before you speed up. Take the time to understand what we need and how it is aligned with strategy. Commit to what you promise. That builds trust. Start with people and letting go of your professional mask to be the best version of yourself. And then last one, understand the above the line and below the line behaviours. And I like that bit that talks about what creates your best self, but also what creates the self that you are in the shadows, so to speak. So the last question, let's talk future. With your experience both in legacy businesses and startups, where do you think we're heading with AI and collaboration, and what excites or concerns you most about that journey?
Societal change is challenging and it takes a long time. It's generational. I think, if I think about my life is very different than when I first started work. There was no computers. Well, there was a mainframe computer with a green screen. No mobile phones. No email, no internet. Fast forward 40 years, we've now got AI which seems to be the next big thing. But AI, once again, is an enabler of what we want.
Yeah.
So I do think that the human-centric approach is still paramount because the technology can drive us. People and strategy has got to determine what that technology should be so we can deliver on those priorities in terms of disciplined execution. I was talking to someone this morning about our interview and I said, so it's like when the internet came, we could get an answer to everything, but you needed to do a lot of research and pull out sources for and then you needed to put it all together. To me, AI just pulls it all together into a concise form, but we also need to know the source of it, and it needs to align with our attitudes, our human-centric desires. It needs to align with integrity, intention, because unless we get those things right, Rod, it can also be a dark force. It's important to start with what is it we're wanting to do? How is it? So values and behaviours, this above the line and below the line. Harvest, for example, it is looking for radical transparency where margins are visual to everyone in the supply chain. It's also into radical responsibility where everybody takes responsibility for their promise. And what those two things do is it removes blame from the system and it removes the idea that I'm right and you're wrong. And it nurtures this concept of curiosity and learning with the idea of responsibility and transparency. In the Me We story, we spoke about trust, care, courage, and that was in contrast to fear, doubt, and hatred. In the dominator model, motivating people by fear, the resentment, the broken relationships, and then the doubt that there was no certainty creates a mess that's chaotic. Whereas trust means I can trust you to do what you say. I care about your message and I'm going to make sure that I help you be successful. Then I'm going to have the courage to call out what's not right or what is right in that system. So trust, care, courage is driving an upward spiral in the human experience, Rod, versus fear, doubt, and hatred is driving a downward spiral. And we'd all rather be in that upward trajectory of being the best version of ourselves. We're going to have all sorts of data available to us, but it's still going to be driven by what the intention is of the people setting the strategic objectives, which is ultimately delivered by people. And depending on who wins that fight, is it dark or is it light? Rod, philosophically, it's the same question I've had for 40 years of why would we want to fight, compete and be in conflict compared to collaborate if we've got a choice? So the Harvest Stack message is people, planet and plate. That means people win, the plate wins and the planet wins because it's now sustainable and we know we're doing the right thing. We're going to have all the AI tools that support that we are going to disrupt a supply chain with the right intention and with integrity. And we're going to be open to everybody to go, are you living true to your vision?
That's a nice way to end this. So what I heard is AI is enabler and you still need a human-centric approach. We still need to know the source of the data coming out of the system and align that with our direction. We need to understand what it is we want to do. And I loved your two comments about radical transparency and radical responsibility to end up removing the blame and distrust in the supply chain. And then that last one, collaboration means win-win. That was brilliant. Thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning into this special final episode of the Tech Transform podcast. Over 11 episodes, we've explored not just the tools and techniques that drive transformation, but also the mindsets, behaviors, and cultures that help it stick. Stephen's reminder today that tech without trust isn't a recipe for failure is the perfect note to end this chapter. At Oliver White, we believe that real transformation happens when people, processes, and technologies align. And that starts with leadership, clarity, and the courage to evolve. This is the last episode in our initial series. We'll be back from time to time as new developments arise and new voices emerge because transformation is never finished. If you'd like to connect with Stephen, you can reach him at Hanman@stephenhanman.com or visit stephenhanman.com. If you'd like to explore how Oliver White can help your business navigate the tech curve, visit www.oliverwhiteasiapacific.com or email us at information@oliverwhite.com. Let's continue to tech transform with Oliver White, navigating today, shaping tomorrow, and giving your career a head start by staying ahead of the tech curve. Until next time, whenever that may be, take care.